Hi everyone. This is going to be a fairly brief lecture, but one that explains a little bit about the palette that you're using, where we've tried to mix out a palette that references a 10-step grayscale if you're in the beginning class. If you are in the intermediate class, then you've done one that is still, it still goes to this 10-step grayscale idea. However, you're missing some of the steps. So your top step for your three colors, where the pure color is at, is either a 9 or 10. And then you've mixed tints off of those pure colors of ivory black, raw umber, and burnt umber to create an 8, a 6, a 4, and a 2. And then white is your 1. So for those of you that are in the beginning class, don't let that confuse you. What you guys have done is basically mix, trying to move that bar out of the way a little more, basically mix this scale. And yours might not match this exactly, but that's totally fine. It just is kind of representing what that scale might look like. So why we're mixing that scale is basically because it really helps us when we're making decisions with our still life and trying to understand what the different values are of our objects and really separating out our shadow and light sides effectively to create a good composition that also has a good sense of volume. It references the volume correctly and creates three-dimensional volume. And one of the key things with that is controlling value. So as we fast forward through this a little bit, I started writing in the value scales. This is for the tin can. And basically I decided that I was going to say the tin can, I adjusted this a little bit as I thought about it some more. I think that the tin can shadow side is more like an 8.5 to a 10. But so here we've got a 9 to a 10 on here. The light side of it is around a 7 to an 8. It might have a little bit in some places that are closer to a 6, so maybe this needs to come down slightly and this needs to come down slightly, but you get a pretty good approximation, and you can see that these two different sides of the tin can don't mesh. They don't cross over each other. Then as we go a little further, I decided to figure out what I felt like the main shadow and light values were for the white cup and the drapery in this still life. So I decided that the shadow side, and I'm talking about all these main shadows, not the really deep little pits like this, but the main shadows, we're looking around like a 5 to a 7. They might go a little darker, obviously, because when we look at some of these areas, they do go a little darker, probably closer to an 8. And the light side I put as a 2 to a 4, using that range of light values. Again, the important thing is that these two sides of these objects don't mesh with each other. And then the last object that I tried to reference in here was the blue bottle. Oops. So this is the blue bottle right here, and basically I said that the shadow side of the blue bottle is around, okay, so let me clarify that. There's not really a shadow side of the blue bottle. However, because the blue bottle is transparent, however, there are values that get darker because of objects going behind the blue bottle that are in shadow. Okay, so that would be like the shadow side of this drapery gets a little darker. It goes from a 5 to a 7 to a 7 to about a 9. Going behind is what I kind of guessed. And maybe 9s in some of these areas as well. Okay, some of these areas where the thickness of the bottle gets really dark. And then the light side of this blue bottle, these light values of 2 through 4 definitely darken as they go back here. Okay, so if this area, if this bottle wasn't here, this area or this area would be in the same light that you see down here, where it's a 2 through 4. But because it's back here behind the bottle, I put it somewhere around a 5 to a 7. So it darkens quite a bit as it goes behind. What's important to understand is even though you might have like values from different objects that overlap, like here we've got the shadow side of the blue bottle overlaps around the light side of the tin can with some of those same values, the values within each object itself does not overlap. So they're separated between these two sides. When we have shadow on an object like the tin can and we've got reflected light and we see that reflected light, we should not be painting that reflected light in with the same values that we see in this light side. Same thing down here. We've got some nice reflections happening within this white cup, but they are not anywhere near as bright as these areas here that are being hit directly by the light source. So that's really kind of important to remember as you're going through. This is just kind of a brief explanation of how to handle it, but hopefully it makes sense to you. And I've mentioned before in my demos and so on Zoom that it's a little bit paint by number in a way, but the thing is that it's just like that in the beginning. What I want you guys to do is to make very thought out, clear decisions on these value references for each of your objects so that you can keep from making mistakes, okay? And then as you get more and more experience and you work a little bit more intuitively, this will be second nature to you. But for right now, while it's not second nature, if you make some of these decisions ahead of time, it'll really help you apply the values of your palette a little bit more coherently into the painting to create a good sense of volume and not confuse things. When we blend, we tend to just push things around back and forth, and it's great for like softening brush marks, but blending is not the way we should be pushing into our values. We should be hitting our values correctly from the very start, or as close to correct as we can get, and then softening and making adjustments, but you need to really train your eye to see those correctly first. Okay, that's it. Thank you.